Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Chris Parker. Chris, how you doing today, man?
Oh, doing good. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's such an honor to have you here. Now, before we talk about why you're here, Chris, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are a Mexican American film critic who began reviewing movies on YouTube in 2016, and your channel, 3C Films, has gained over 500,000 subscribers. Now, that alone, congratulations, man.
Thank you.
The
Thank you.
hard work and dedication it takes to be able to build that type of community is amazing. And you've built your community based on, fans that just want to talk about the latest blockbusters, horror movies, comedies, and also being very, very informative to your audience and entertaining as well. So I know it was back in 2016, but what gave you the drive to say, you know what? I love film. I want to review it. This is what I want to do.
Well, I always watched YouTube commentary channels back to the early days of YouTube. There used to be a guy I would watch named Peter Rawlis. He'd have a channel named Movie Buzz, and I'd watch that, and then AMC Movie Talk and all that. So I was always looking at movie commentary channels, and it just got to the point where it's like, I wonder if I can attempt to do this, and thankfully it worked out.
Yeah, it did. You have an amazing channel. And for those of you that haven't already, I have all of Chris's social media links as well as his YouTube link down in the description. So please make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel. Make sure you're following him on social media so you can stay up to date on all the amazing things he has coming out for us as well. So something I've been wanting to ask every reviewer before we get into their first horror movie. Right now we're in 2024 at the time of filming. What's been your favorite horror movie of the year so far?
I know Immaculate was one of them. Abigail, there we go. I really liked Abigail. That was I had a lot of fun. I guess it leans more a little bit into the comedy, but as far as horror movie goes and blood and stuff like that, I really enjoyed Abigail. Right now,
I'm gonna
that's my favorite.
I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I gave Abigail a 4.5 out of 5 stars or 5 skulls by our ranking, and that's been my favorite of the year too. Followed closely by Late Night with the Devil,
Late Night with the Devil was
and
really good too.
I also really liked Lisa Frankenstein, man. Like
Oh, I
I
still have to
really
see
did
that
like
one. I
that.
still have to see that one.
Oh, dude, I loved it. Two of my three favorite movies of the year are based around Universal monsters, and I think it's awesome that we're getting that resistance, coming a
Hmm.
renaissance. I mean, of the Universal
Exciting.
monsters coming back.
Yeah.
So, um, we know that you have an amazing YouTube channel, and you talk about horror movies, but in order to do that, Chris, horror had to start for you somewhere. So now I would like to go back to the past and talk about what it was that got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Chris, the first horror movie you watched was.
Nightmare on Elm Street was my very first one. It was I want to say I was like about 6, 7 years old. It was back. My dad was working at a Blockbuster, and he would just it was during the transition between DVDs to VHSs. So I guess at this time they were either getting rid of VHSs or throwing away old copies or run down. Because every now and then my dad would just come home with a box of VHSs with no slip covers or anything, just random VHSs, and he couldn't afford a babysitter, so there'd be a 3 hour period. I'd be home alone waiting for my dad to come home after I took the bus home to school, and I would just stick my hand in that box, and whatever would come up, I'd pop it in and see if I enjoyed it. And Nightmare on Elm Street became one of those accidental ones where it was I watched it, but it got too scary for me to get up and turn it off, and so I just ended up seeing the whole thing.
See, and it's amazing because my parents owned a mom and pop video store growing
Oh,
up. So I
cool.
was very lucky to grow up in a video store.
Nice.
And for people our age, YouTube was walking up and down the aisles looking at the cover
Hmm.
arts,
That
trying
was
to
always
figure
fun.
out which movie we wanted to watch. And um, Nightmare on Elm Street, what a fantastic start to your horror life. You can make the argument it's a psychological movie. You can make the argument it's a slasher film. But something you can't argue is it's fucking amazing. So we know that you were very young when you had seen it for the first time, and we know that you were all alone, which, holy shit, even crazier. But
Yeah.
do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
For me, it had been Tina's death in that. If you've seen it, you know the one where she just gets like floated up in the air, is tossed all around. Her boyfriend's watching her, she's getting slashed around. It was such a crazy thing to see at such a young age, and I was just all eyes on them, couldn't look away, mouth open, all that. It was a really traumatizing scene. Made me scared to go to bed that night.
See, and that scene, this is what I love about A Nightmare on Elm Street, and I've talked about this a lot. This I put up there with An American Werewolf in London and The Thing for
Mm.
movies that practically still hold up today
Oh yeah.
just as well as they did in 1984. The Spinning Room and
Yeah. All
the
the stuff
the
they had to do behind the scenes is crazy for that movie.
right. And what people I've talked about this before, but Robert Englund is on screen for that movie for like 7 minutes because they didn't have the money to redo his makeup all the time. So, like, that's why you don't really see Freddy kill anybody in this movie. He's not there
Not
during the
that
kill
much,
scenes, and it's just an amazing way for Wes Craven to go. You know what? I'm going to create something. Less is more. Nothing scarier than what happens in your imagination. Meet Freddy Krueger. So
yeah.
we know which scene affected you the most, Chris. But what would you say your favorite scene from Nightmare on Elm Street is?
My favorite scene from that movie would have to be the alley scene where we start to see him get his arms really long, and that scene I just remember watching like, what the heck? That had to
Yeah,
be my favorite scene. Just seeing what little things Freddy Krueger could do to play mind tricks on his victims.
and that was another scene that, as a kid, scared the living shit out of me, Chris. Like, when I tell you that scene scared me, like I couldn't fathom in my brain how they were able to do something so spectacular on
Hmm.
screen. And Nightmare on Elm Street is a part of a franchise, as we all know, a
Oh
big
yeah.
franchise that we hope will be expanding.
Oh my
But at the
goodness.
time of filming, the last thing we got was the remake of the franchise. We know it started with part one, but what is your favorite film in the Nightmare franchise?
My personal favorite sequel. I'm one of those that's a heavy defender of Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't think there is a bad one, minus Freddy's Dead. But even in Freddy's Dead, I feel like there's a little to enjoy in there. But I love all the sequels. My favorite one have to be Dream Warriors, though. Nightmare on Elm Street 3. I felt like that was such a good balance of like zany dream sequences, iconic kills. Freddy Krueger was also like he found that Robert Englund that one became a little bit more jokey, but it wasn't overbearing to the point where he had a power glove on and was making
Right.
Nintendo jokes. So Nightmare on Elm Street 3 for me is my favorite one.
That's also one of those movies where, and I'm talking about of all franchises, not just Nightmare, you
Oh
actively root for every single one of your protagonists in this movie.
yeah. Hmm.
We all know when we're watching a Nightmare, Friday the 13th, the Halloween, secretly we're kind of rooting for our villain.
Yeah.
We want to see him take out some meat bags. But in Nightmare 3, there isn't that meat bag. Every single kid in that movie you feel for. You
Yeah.
you really grow to love each one of those characters,
That's
and the
so true.
character development in that movie is fucking fantastic. And um I'm glad you picked that one because it's universally one of the most beloved films in this franchise, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
it's great. And I'm with you. I don't think there's a bad Nightmare movie. For me personally, it'd be The Dream Child would be at the bottom of the list, just
Dream Child,
because.
really? Okay, I understand. I like that one, but no, I
See,
get it. I get it. I get it.
the only reason why I think is because Freddy's Dead. My uncle opening night took me and my cousins to see that movie in cinema in 3D. So it'll
Oh
always
yeah, I
have that
forgot that was in 3D.
nostalgic, going to see it in
Yeah.
3D with my uncle. So that's why I think that movie I hold a special place
Oh, I
for. But
understand.
like you said, now you're playing with power is a little goofy when you're 38 and you're watching it.
Yeah.
Um, so I do want to bounce back to the original Nightmare for a second. We talked a little bit about Tina's death, and there's not very many kills in Nightmare on Elm Street. If you count the mother, you really get 4 kills in this movie, but they go for quality over quantity in this
Yeah.
movie, huge. So without counting Tina's death, what would you say your favorite death in that movie is?
I guess the Johnny Depp one then, just because the effect that they do there with the blood and the way it goes all over the room, and Nancy's for just across the neighborhood watching all that. That was a good one.
Yeah. And I love how she's like, don't fall asleep. He's like, deal.
Yeah.
um, so we did get the reboot,
Mhm.
the Jackie Earl Haley led reboot. Did you see the reboot of Nightmare on Elm Street? And if so, were you a fan?
I remember being so excited for it just for the fact that we were getting a new movie. Of course, I was sad that Robert Englund wasn't going to be Freddy anymore, but a part of me understood it was like time to pass that torch on and see who could do it. And although I liked Jackie Earl Haley and I felt like he could have done something, I felt the material wasn't enough for him to like grow as his own or do something special with it. And I can understand why people will like that movie if that's their first intro to Freddy, just because it takes so much from that first movie and it's a little bit of updated modern effects, although I don't like a lot of the CG they throw in there, especially with like Freddy coming out the walls. I'm like, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise was built on practical effects. Doing stuff like that just takes you out of it. But the biggest thing I hated about it was the insinuation that Freddy was now pedo. And I know that was something like in behind the scenes that they maybe wanted to do originally, but they never fully committed to. And I just prefer Freddy to just be a kid killer over a kid tickler, just because there's one thing to be horrifying and just gross, you know. And so that aspect of the reboot really killed it for me. But if it didn't have that, I would have thought it was just fine.
Which I agree with you. I want to state that right off the top. I agree with you. But how funny is it that us as human beings, like, if you want to kill the kids, that's one thing, man. But like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, and I've
exactly.
said it before, like when it comes to playing Freddy Krueger the villain, Jackie Earle Haley did better than Robert Englund. And hear me out. Robert Englund is Freddy. Robert Englund is great as Freddy. He is the perfect Freddy, but I love him. And I'm not supposed to. You know, he's supposed
Mm,
to be this dark, scary
that's so
monster.
true.
And Jackie Earle Haley brought that out. Like every
That's
time you
true.
see Jackie Earle Haley, you're like, this guy's fucking disgusting. I hate him. I can't stand him. He did the job. He
Yeah.
absolutely was like, I'm going to take this role. I'm going to make it as dark and disgusting as I can. You know, ooh, sounds fun. And you're like, oh my God, somebody fucking kill this guy.
Gets
So
his
I do got
moments, yeah.
mad respect for that. But
Yeah.
where it fell flat for me was like you, the wall CGI in comparison to the latex. That to me is like, we were just talking about it. The effects from '84 hold up. And then you have this movie that comes in, shits all over them.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, and now, you know, Hollywood is all about the remakes, reboots, requels. That's, you
Yeah.
know, getting even more popular with Scream and Halloween. Would you like to see them try attempt another
Oh
Nightmare on Elm
heck
Street
yeah.
film?
I
And if
I
so, what direction would you like to see them go?
I do. I think the Freddy origin story is very iconic. I just there's I think elements you stay true to, and there's elements you wiggle around with. I think the whole got away of trial, miscarriage of justice situation, parents taking that into their own hands. I love that. Keep that. I
Yep.
don't think you have to have a Nancy or that you have to have this exact way. I feel like there's some wiggle room in there. I don't want it to be a remake again of that original. I'd like them to be a little bit more open to it, but practical effects would be big for me. And in my mind, I'm like, if we can find 8 different interpretations of the Joker, we should be able to find a couple interpretations of Freddy Krueger. I'm not saying they're similar, but they're not saying they're the same, but I think they are similar in more ways than we would think with their maniacal and creepiness. I feel like there's someone that can put their own spin on Freddy where it isn't copying Robert, but doing their own thing. So I'm all up for it. I don't know how they go about doing it now.
Damien Leone, give
Damien,
him a Nightmare on Elm
oh,
Street. I would love, with his
Terrifier,
practical
right?
effects and how twisted he is, to see him have his own interpretation of Freddy.
Yeah,
I really feel confident that he would keep it practical and that he would give us
probably.
something that would shock us. So
Yeah.
I would be all about him tackling a big franchise. I mean, look what he did building up Art the Clown. You
Yeah, and I
know,
think he even gave Art some like dreamlike powers too in that second movie. So he's got an
exactly.
interest in that.
Right. So we've talked about A Nightmare on Elm Street being your first horror movie. We've dabbled into the franchise a little bit and what the franchise means to you. But here for a second, Chris, I do want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. My little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Chris? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
If it isn't Nightmare on Elm Street 3, because like I said, I just really love that one, it would have to be Scream. Stereotypical as it is, but like it was funny enough because I saw Scary Movie, the parody, before I ever saw Scream. That's just because the generation I was raised, the like just the
Yeah.
age I was in, I was when the first Scream came out, 98 or 95 or
96.
96. So I was only 1 years old when the first Scream movie came out. And
God, I'm geriatric. I remember seeing that movie in the cinema.
oh man, that's awesome. So I caught Scary Movie first, and I always thought this is what the Scream franchise was, and it wasn't until years later, I was like maybe 12, 13, I finally popped it in, and I thought knowing because Scary Movie takes a lot of plot elements, I thought it would ruin it, but I just remember being like blown away. I'm like, whoa, like this is cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that franchise so much.
And without Scream, and I've said this 1,000 times, for people that listen to the podcast, I'm sorry, but without Scream happening in 1996, horror is not what it is right now.
Hmm.
Scream came in and completely
Oh yeah,
rejuvenated the horror genre and,
for
you know,
sure.
put it back on top. So I've got an infinite amount of love and respect for Scream. I hated it when it first came out. To me, it was like, oh,
Oh,
this I was a little punk rock
No, you're
shithead, and I was like,
good.
this movie made horror cool. You know what I mean? Like fucking sellouts type thing. But the
No, that's
movie's so
funny.
fucking
It
fantastic, and
is.
it's so great. I was a closet Scream fan. I got a fucking the Scream tattoo on
Oh,
my arm
nice.
when I was
Okay.
15. So like, I was always like a closet Scream fan, but it wasn't cool to like it because it was like
Yeah.
trendy and popular, you know. But the movie's so damn good, and one of the best franchises ever when it comes to consistency.
Yeah.
So I can't argue with you there, man. I've got nothing but love and respect for that franchise and what they were able to build. You know, Wes, what he's able to do with
Oh,
his
Wes is
original
amazing.
ideas. And we've talked about it too. Thank God Wes Craven's New Nightmare flopped because Wes Craven's New Nightmare walked so that Scream could run.
That's so
And
true.
if New Nightmare would have been super successful, we may not have ever gotten Scream. He may have continued to go that route with
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street. So that flopped, and he said, "You know what? I dabbled in it, and I'm going to dive right in with Scream." So it worked, man. Chris, I want to thank you for coming and hanging out with
Oh,
me,
thank
talking about
you.
your first and favorite horror movies. But before I let you go, we always bounce back to the same question. We're going to go back to Nightmare on Elm Street 84. And what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, here's the thing. We're not ranking this movie on acting, production, score, direction. You know, we're not being critics now. What we're doing here, my friend, is ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So, zero skulls being not effective, five being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. And I think I know the answer, Chris, but my
Yeah.
script tells me I got to ask. What would your ranking of Nightmare on Elm Street be?
I mean, for me, it would definitely be Five Schools. I don't know if I'd be a big of a horror fan if it wasn't for that moment and it'd be so injected into it. I don't know. I think of like in the future when I want to have kids, when is the right time to show them these kind of movies or get into that? Because I got it by accident and whatnot. And from there, that sparked my curiosity for the sequels and other franchises. And I loved movies. I loved watching them like if they were roller coasters. It was scary, but it was always fun in the end. So if it wasn't for that faithful moment and having that fearful feeling, I don't know if I'd be here as a horror fan.
I would never, ever, ever tell someone how to parent their kids. Never do it. I have a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and I let them discover horror when I felt like they were ready. I sat them down, I educated them. My
Hmm.
daughter got to go to set with me when I was on The Bride of
Oh,
the Killer
nice.
Pinata. She got to watch me get my face ripped off, so she knew,
Oh,
you know,
nice.
daddy's wearing makeup, daddy's okay, daddy's fine. So these are the type of things that I feel like as long as you get the education to go along with it, then you're fine. It'll help
Yeah,
you in the long run to understand the difference between fantasy and reality. You know, like
yeah,
you talk about how on your channel, you want to keep people informed, you want to educate people, but you want to entertain them as well. And I feel like the same goes with your children. You know, as long as you
yeah,
educate them, this is fake, this isn't real. We also look at behind the scenes. You know, we watch behind the scenes stuff whenever we watch a scary movie that I don't know if my daughters I just took my daughters to see Abigail and they loved it.
oh,
And
that's a great
for
one.
spoiler alert, for like 4 days, my youngest daughter, who's 4, was walking around going, "Sammy, those are fucking onions." And I was like, "Henry, you gotta stop saying that, babe. I know you loved it, but you gotta stop saying it." So I know I said it at the beginning, guys, but we're at the end of the third act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, please make sure you're following Chris on social media as well as subscribing to his YouTube channel. You don't have to go far. Those links are right down in the description. He's an amazing content creator. We've been trying to make this happen for a long time, and we finally were able to get the timing right to make it happen. And I couldn't be any more excited that we finally got to do this. So please he's one of my influences. He's one of Ashley's influences. She's a huge fan of his as well. So please make sure that you are subscribing to him and checking out the hard work that he puts into his channel. Chris, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you. Everyone else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It helps to build the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.